So we're going to change pace a little bit. Our next caller saw an apparition of a child who disappeared from their pantry and believes it was a ghost. Kate from Illinois, you're on with Ethan and Steve. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Ethan and Steve? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for calling in today. It's good to hear from you. And thank you for waiting on hold.
No problem.
So what do you
So,
what do you
okay,
got for us?
I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in. Back in 2012, my husband and I and our two daughters moved in with my mother-in-law into his childhood home, the farm that he grew up on. We had a lot of work going on in the house, so we decided to move in with them. It was easier. About a month after we moved in, I was pulling into the driveway, and the house was situated as such where the headlights shine directly into where the kitchen table is, and directly across from that is a pantry. And I thought it was my kid, just a child kind of dart from the table into the pantry. They didn't really recognize the pajamas, but whatever, Grandma probably had them. I come in the house, and I could see the child peeking out, like from behind the door a little bit of the pantry. I set my purse down on the table to the right, turned to the left, grabbed the door, and went peekaboo, and there was no child there. And it just, like, there's no way to get out past me. And, you know, I'm kind of looking around like, how did this happen? And I immediately went into the bedroom that they were staying in. Both of them were sound asleep. Neither one of them were wearing the pajamas I had seen when I saw the child. The next evening, we were having dinner with the family. My sister-in-law and my brother-in-law had come over. And my sister-in-law asked, how's everything going? And I said, great. But, did you ever get the feeling that this house was haunted? And she just, like, the color drained from her face. She went pretty cold, and she started telling me a couple stories. And as she was telling me, my brother-in-law walks up, and he's like, well, how did you know about that? I never told anybody about that. And she's like, no, this happened to me. And he's like, no, that happened to me. And so as the conversation went on, my husband joined in, my mother-in-law joined in. They ended up all sharing these stories that were really similar to each other, but they'd never told each other growing up. So it was really weird. Then somehow the subject got onto their dog, their family pet. His name was Scruffy, who had passed away a few months before we had moved in. He was like 15 or 16 years old. They tell this story about him. They all laugh, and then it kind of falls silent, as it tends to do. And just as it falls silent, we hear the basement door, the door to the basement steps, which is an exterior door, slam shut, the clip, 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 clip of dog paws going down the steps, and then you could hear the squeak of his little box springs of the bed that they had for him in the basement. Well, the problem with that was that door had been screwed shut since Scruffy died, months before this. Completely screwed shut. They had work done on the house. My dog was asleep on the porch. We could see her right through the window. And like there was really no way to explain that. And even my mother-in-law, she was like, that sounded just like Scruffy came in the house. And it was so crazy. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
So do these type of...
seeing the child and everything, I could have written off, but the dog thing was really strange.
Was the child apparition your first encounter with something like this, or have you had a lot of events like these taking place in your life?
Growing up, I had a lot of events taking place like that, and into my adult life. So it was just really strange to me. It didn't alarm me. It didn't scare me. I thought, wow, if that was a ghost, that's cool. If not, that's cool. It really didn't. I was fairly used to any kind of activity or the possibility of activity by then. I just thought it was strange. They're like, it didn't seem like the type of family that would experience anything like that or have kept it from each other or even me. Them knowing that I was pretty open to all things paranormal and supernatural. So,
Steve, have you ever dealt with people who have seen apparitions before?
Privately, yes. And also, I can tell you that I've dealt with experiences like this from when I was younger. I used to I would now say it's hallucinations, but when I was younger, I would have, well, I know what I saw, and I would describe it as, some people would say to me, "You didn't see it," and I'd be like, "No, I did see it," and I realize now that that's not the right approach to these kind of topics. So this has been a very interesting story here, and I'm looking forward to diving in. I don't know if you want me to go first, Ethan, or
Yeah, go ahead.
all right, sweet. So what's what's interesting? Well, where to start? Okay, when I was young, I used to see similar kind of things. Some of them were obviously hallucinations. So well, I say it's obvious, maybe not. For instance, you know, in Lord of the Rings, you have that I forget what they're called, but you have like a black cloak that's like floating off the ground, and it comes towards the screen.
Confession:
Right.
I've never seen Lord of the Rings before.
Blasphemy! Absolute blasphemy!
I can't sit through a 3-hour movie unless it's a Marvel movie. Those are just
Dude.
I put on the first Lord of the Rings. I got through about 40 minutes, and I'm like, this is so boring, and I turned it off.
Well, I am grotesquely offended.
Insane.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
What's going on? What's
I'm
this?
sorry. And it was totally up my alley. I loved movies like that when I was a kid, but no, I have the attention span of a kindergartner.
Same. It is so difficult for me to focus on things, especially like really long movies. Like I said, unless it's a Marvel movie. Like the next Spider-Man is going to be 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and I can't wait. I'm super excited. I got tickets to see it on Thursday.
That's unless it's non-stop action throughout the entirety, you're not interested.
Yeah, I get no. If it has a good story, I'm down. But Lord of the Rings just seems like it was. What's that guy? It just seems like it's just walking for 9 hours straight. Like that's all they're doing is walking.
Oh goodness! Like, right, we're done with this. We're shelving this. We're getting back to the claim. I cannot.
We'll get back to the claim.
I'm triggered. Okay, so all right. So I saw these hallucinations. Some of them I would now say are quite easy to identify as just very strong, and like they feel absolutely real as any experience that I've had. That I would say I actually did have. But some of them were genuinely difficult to identify whether or not they were hallucinations. Now, there's a philosopher called Graham Oppy, who's someone that I've really enjoyed the work of, and the way that he looks at these kind of things, the way he looks at the world in general, if I'm not misrepresenting him, is that we basically want explanations for things that we see and things that we experience, and normally we will pay what's known as an ontological price. We will pay a price in what we commit ourselves to in order to get those explanations. So, for instance, I've got a mug right here. If this mug I turned and it was gone, there's various ways that I can explain that. One way I can explain it is by saying I must have put it down in a different position to what I remember. And in terms of commitments, that doesn't commit me to much. It just commits me to humans can make mistakes. And I know that's true, so it's not a cost, really. Or I could say a ghost moved it. That's very, very expensive because all of a sudden I have to commit myself to the idea that things which have like my consciousness or a consciousness like me can exist without a body, that they can exist in a realm that's not physical, and that they can interact with a physical world despite not being physical themselves, if you see what I mean. There's a lot of like things I've got to buy into in order to have that as an explanation, whereas I could just say I must have made a mistake. The same is true of hallucinations. I can say, look, we know that we hallucinate, and we also know that we can have group hallucinations, and people can have very similar hallucinations, and that people, when they speak about it, will have their memory, their memories change. Our memories change as we go over it. It doesn't stay the same. There's plenty of studies on this. Committing yourself to that explanation of things doesn't cost you anything. You don't need to commit yourself to any of these extra things that we don't use as explanations elsewhere, or we're going to pay that higher price. So there's the first response I would have is that it's quite costly. So I guess I could phrase this as a question for you. When we damage our brain, we know that it corresponds with our personality changing, right? So if you damage the prefrontal cortex, it makes it so that we've got this down to a T. We know precisely how that affects an individual. If you damage this part, it does this. You damage this part, it does this. But in order to have a ghost, or in order to have something that exists after its death, such as the dog or whatever it might be, we need to believe that when we die, all of this and this dies, the consciousness somehow is fine. For what reason do you think that's true? And I assume that you would have to think that that is true to attribute these things to these individuals, to these ghosts. Why would you? What makes you think that's likely?
Well, when it comes to the child, I'm not sure that was an actual ghost, as in a trapped soul or consciousness that's stuck somewhere in this dimension. I believe it was perhaps, or could have been, more like a residual type situation, where bringing young children back into the home and bringing a pet back into the home may have kind of brought a little bit of solidness, made some imprinted emotional energy kind of visible to me. I only say that because we noted the pajamas, and the pajamas was the strange thing. As I described them to my mother-in-law, she recognized them, which back in the 80s, every little boy had, Thundercats pajamas with the red t-shirt or the blue t-shirt and the red sweatpants. So, and that's what I saw. So I had never seen those in the house. There's no pictures, of my husband wearing them, but, one could assume that I would just assume he had those, considering we were the same age. When it comes to the dog, again, I don't know if that was so much a trapped spirit of Scruffy or a kind of like a manifestation of collective consciousness focusing on that animal. It was the first time all three of them had been in the house since he passed away. They all love that dog very much. He was there for a big part of their lives. So having them all remember or having the same memories and laughing may have kind of, again, sparked that energy residual having been left over from when he was alive. I'm a big believer in, emotional energy and trauma imprints on the fabric of this time, and certain circumstances, whether it be, the moon is here and, someone flushed a toilet in Japan and whatever it is, no one really knows the algorithm of what would cause these things to become visible. But I am a big believer in there's a difference between spirits and ghosts, and not everything paranormal that people experience is an actual example of consciousness of a previously living being. I do believe in the power of imprinted emotional energy. So I think that's more what it was.
Did I hear you correctly in saying you believe that bringing children and pets into the home gave you some type of imprint or changed something for you?
I believe it stirred up what was already there. Just a lot went on in that house. A lot of stuff went down in that house when they were kids that was traumatic to them. They had a good childhood and everything, but there was some trauma there at home. So, like I said, I believe high emotional situations do kind of leave an imprint or a little residual energy behind. And with bringing kids back in, young kids back into the house, and a dog back into the house after having been empty for a while of those things, could have possibly kind of stirred up a little bit of residual energy. It's what I believe it was.
So why, like for me, when I see things, or I typically write them off as, hey, I saw something, I don't know what I saw, but I won't jump to it being a ghost. I'll just say, I don't know. Why not stay on that and say, like, hey, I saw something, I don't know what it is. What's bringing you from that I don't know what it is to this is a ghost or a soul or another some type of consciousness?
I believe it was because it was a child. And I was fairly new mom. My oldest was 6, so I'm fairly new mom. And it was the fact that it was a child and it was not either one of mine. It had to be something else. And it was I know memories change as we remember, but this has not changed since I saw it. And it caught me off guard. I was not expecting it at all. But I do believe, that I went in more of the spiritual ghost connection, only because I have no other way to explain why I would have seen a child when it clearly wasn't either one of mine. And the resemblance, perhaps, the fact that I just thought it was one of my kids, it was the right size, the right hair color. I think maybe that's why I focused on it a little bit more. Normally I would have been like, yeah, whatever, maybe I was tired or sleepwalking or maybe, and it stuck in the back of my brain. I didn't focus on it like the whole next day or anything, but she just happened to ask me how things were going, and that it was strange. It was very strange, and I have to believe it was because I saw a child.
Can I ask if you are a Christian, if you're a theist, if you believe in God?
I'm not a Christian. I'm a Satanist.
Okay.
Ooh.
But I believe in a creator.
Okay, so do you want to go?
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just, so you're not the Church of Satan Satanist, where they don't believe in a God. You do believe in a God.
I believe in the possibility. I believe in the possibility of a God. The Church of Satan, they're more lean towards the atheist side. I'm part of the Satanic Temple, which we're allowed to believe whatever we want to believe. If we want to believe in God, that's great. If not, that's great. But the church doesn't, the temple doesn't, offer any education to believe in either way.
The Satanic Temple was atheist in nature.
Satanic, but not. They don't believe in a literal Satan.
Correct.
And the temple itself does not, propagate belief in any deity or anything like that. But we're allowed to believe whatever we want.
Okay, so the reason I bring this up is that there's something known as God of the Gaps. You may or may not be aware of it, but basically what's happened throughout history is we've said, we don't know, therefore God, right? So before Charles Darwin, before we understood about evolution by natural selection, you had William Paley and theists in general. In the States and in the Middle East, you still have this happening where they will say, we don't know how we got the complexity of what we are. No way to explain it other than we are God's creation. And what you said was that you didn't know how to explain this. Therefore, this is the best explanation to go for. And as in the concentrated energy from multiple people in the house that love the dog, I'm not sure that I see how that's not an argument from ignorance, which is we don't know, therefore God. I guess in this case, to throw in a horrible pun, we don't know, therefore dog. But if we consider this, right? So you've got two.
Sorry, that tickled.
I'm glad you liked it. So consider this then. You've got two supernatural explanations on the table. So, I mean, you've got other natural ones. One could be that it was a hallucination. Another one could be that there was a rat in the mattress that was bouncing up and down. And one could be that, there was structural damage that was caused that isn't visible, but it caused it to shake or whatnot. But the two supernatural ones you put on the table is that dogs have spirits and can interact with physical objects. So there's a lot, as I was saying, about in cost to be able to commit yourself in order to get that explanation. Or you have that dogs have spirits and can interact with physical objects. Plus, you have this emotional energy that manifests the dog to be able to do it on the mattress. Because both of those are the same, except for the latter has an extra thing on top, which is emotional energy. It seems that if you're going to take one of those propositions, you're surely going to have to be better off going for the first one, because it commits you to less commitments and gets you the same explanation. In philosophy, they would call this Occam's razor. You should take the one that makes fewer assumptions if you get the same explanatory value.
Okay.
So do you see like how that would make it so that your better option here would be to just say that the dog has a spirit and he came in and jumped on the mattress, as opposed to saying that the god has a spirit, he jumped on the mattress because additionally there was emotional energy. Like the scenarios are the same, except one of them has extra baggage that doesn't do anything to make the explanation easier or better in any way.
Well, in the way that I framed it and what I believe, I do believe that, every animal I do believe dogs have spirits, but that's not what I believe happened in this situation.
May I interject for a
think
moment?
that, pardon me?
May I just, if I could interject for one moment. So do you believe all animals have spirits? Is it just dogs and cats, or where are you at on this? Like, do snakes and tarantulas, do they have them too?
Slugs?
Possibly. I don't put much thought into that part of it. I think probably I believe this because of the attachment, the emotional attachment to dogs and pets that we love.
So
and other experiences growing up and stuff like that, but I would have to analyze those from all sides, and I just never did. Yes, I leaned more towards the supernatural because we could not understand how or why we would have heard that door slam. And the noise of going down the stairs. We just can't explain how we all could have heard that, except for a group hallucination. Which, is that possible? Sure. Hallucination could be the same word for manifestation of activity, depending on what you believe or choose not to believe. If they would have said, no, we've never had any activity in this house ever, I don't know what you're talking about, I probably would have just written it off as I was tired. Maybe I inhaled too many paint fumes from working on the house, whatever. I would have completely ended it right there. Mm-hmm. I was led down that kind of idea of it only because they said yes. And maybe if they would have said yes and his sister would have given me one example, I probably still would have been like, nah, that's not enough, for me to say this was a manifestation of anything. So the idea that, I had no idea they even believed in any of this stuff at the time. So that it shook me a little bit just to hear him, even his mom, talk about things that I had no idea they believed in or the possibility of. So as the conversation just kept going and their experiences were so similar, yet they'd never spoken about it to each other, I thought that was interesting, but again, never dove into it. Had they said, no, we never experienced anything, you're crazy, whatever, I would have said, okay, I'm crazy, and would have just, or I'm overtired, whatever, and would have just dropped it right there. But it just seems like every time I tried to debunk it, something else from, the paranormal side or the spiritual side came in. So that's kind of why we left it like that. You're absolutely right. Something could have moved in the basement and made those, just a matter of timing, made those coils squeak that way. But we can't explain why we all heard that door slam. And
did you say that you've got many other reasons to believe in this supernatural sphere, this astro, realm, whatever it might be? It's not just these two stories. Like, is it true that you have many reasons to believe in this?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So one thing I could say here is that if you find that you've bought into the supernatural, you think it's real and that it's totally a way to explain things, and then you come across a story like this or an event like this, then you have that as part of your epistemic toolkit, which means that you can just say, oh, okay, I can explain that in terms of this. And you're not actually paying much of a price because you've already committed yourself to a supernatural world. Whereas for a skeptic like myself, a naturalist, someone that's I don't need those explanations, even for someone who's hallucinated himself, I presume you can see why I would be so hesitant to buy such a costly explanation when there are good explanations. Also, I just don't know. I can't figure out the answer, which would be more palatable to someone like myself. So yeah, I can sympathize why you would, if you already believe in the supernatural, why you would want to go towards that answer.
Real quick, I want to read a super chat from Philip Leitch. It's important to admit when we're wrong. It's more important to dissect why we're wrong so that we don't make new beliefs based on some unsound reasoning. Let rationality rule. I like that.
Yeah, I like
so
that too.
Kate, are you, it sounds like you might be, it sounds like you're saying you need an explanation for this, since you don't have another explanation that this is. Why not, to jump back to earlier, why not just say, I don't know?
I don't know. This is what I believe, but I don't know.
Okay.
There's no way to know. No, this is what I believe. And I haven't, I have accepted the supernatural and the paranormal, but it's not in the forefront of my daily life. And I'm the kind of person who will absolutely go through everything I can think of environmentally, scientifically, situationally, that could explain these things. And like I said, until there was the child being the child, there was no way for me to explain it to myself. His sister is a person I trust, so if she would have said no, I've never experienced anything in this home whatsoever, I would have completely marked it down as, yes, a hallucination. I must have been, like I said, overtired or distracted, or and had perhaps the situation with the dog activity not happened, I might have even probably still would have gone back to the original sighting was, something that was in my own mind.
Did you say that you don't apply this to many areas of your life? So you'll go for supernatural explanations sometimes, but not all the time.
If I experience something unexplainable and I cannot even spin a logical reason to explain it, then yes, I start to wonder about, okay, what if it was something supernatural or esoteric, or something else that maybe I don't even know exists. The belief of such a thing exists. Maybe it could be something like that, but I don't.
Got you. So what do you think to this worry then?
Go ahead.
Appealing to the supernatural. Apologies for interrupting you. I got the point that I wanted to run with, and that is that if you're going, the problem with having the supernatural to be able to explain things is that you can use it. It's like a tool that can just be used everywhere. I don't know what tool we should, metaphorically give it, but it just applies to basically anything. So for instance, I've turned up at my office, my cup's not in the right place. Well, I could just appeal to the supernatural if I don't want to think about or don't know a natural explanation. My things, some of the bits that I need to be able to record's not here. It's at my house. I could easily just explain that in terms. I could try and explain that in terms of nature and physical things, but I could just go probably some spiritual force, a demonic force moved it. It works as an explanation. And if I was to find that in my life, for all of the easy things, I'm just appealing to nature, I'm appealing to the physical, I'm going, yep, these are the explanations. But whenever things get really difficult and I'm forced into a position where I have to go, I don't really know. And then when I start bringing out the supernatural as an explanation, for me personally, that would tell me that I'm just very uncomfortable with not knowing, and I need to clog it with, I need to know, like it's just an important thing, and that's when I'm appealing to the supernatural. Because if you appeal to the supernatural only for difficult things and not for easy things, I would think that it suggests that you're using it as a gap filler. What do you think to that?
I don't. I understand what you're saying, and it is easy. It could be easy to do that sort of thing, but when you are a full believer in an experience or in these kinds of things, and for the most part alone in that world, you tend to want the supernatural to be the last explanation, because then it could send one into a spiral of why, an existential crisis that will never be able to answer. So, and for me personally, I use the theory of 5 whys to keep myself from spitting out that way. And the supernatural is generally the last thing I would ever want, or I would ever try to contribute, activity to, or something that I think I saw to, or if I'm helping someone who is going through something they're convinced is ghost activity, I am the one who's like, okay, well, let's rule out environmental, let's rule out medical, which is the hardest to rule out. Let's do our best to rule out everything that's explainable, everything that falls in the realm of normal before we even step foot off of the abyss of the paranormal. So I don't use the supernatural in my everyday life to explain really much of anything. When quite frankly, there are times that pops up in almost everyone's life where it could have just been, oh, my dead granny sent me that, or, but I don't do that. I tend to try to be call myself a skeptical believer, because I want to debunk it as best as I can. A lot of times people don't want this to be the things that they experience to be paranormal. They don't, the fear of ghosts and, things from the other side
interesting.
Scare them to a point where they don't want it to be that. And
I find it's the opposite, if I'm honest.
I would agree with Steve.
I think people desperately want to think that they're going to live forever, that they're going to surpass their life, that they're going to see their loved ones, that they see their dog, that they see, I don't anymore, but there's very few people I meet that don't want the supernatural, don't deeply want the supernatural to be true, be it in the form of God or reincarnation or just some astral plane or whatever it might be. Because really it's our only hope for eternal existence. So it's interesting that, fair enough. I appreciate there's going to be people that don't want to go for the supernatural answers, but at least in my experience, the vast majority of people want it, and that's actually something to be very wary of. If we emotionally want something, then that's a big red flag. We have to spend more time and attention to make sure that we don't, have cognitive bias and dissonance towards positions that we want emotionally to be true.
And I'll be the first to admit I am one of those people. I don't believe in the supernatural or the paranormal because I don't believe there's sufficient evidence for it. But I want to believe, like the idea that I could see certain family members and friends again. I love that. Like that one day I could know everything because I could, live on past this life. Like that's an exciting thought to me. But just because I want that doesn't mean I should believe it. Which
to the
brings
contrary.
me to my question. We got to wrap this call in just a moment, but if Kate, if you don't know, and if we don't have a way to test this, then why do you believe?
Honestly, because it's more hopeful to believe than not to.
And I have a question from the audience. I keep forgetting to ask you this. One of the people wants to know if the door was still nailed shut after you heard that noise.
Yes.
Okay. Richard, I hope that answered your question.
That was.
And then,
the door was still nailed shut. We could get through to the basement from inside the house as well.
And then Ameet Mathew says, why are aliens or time-traveling pranksters never considered as potential explanations? My best guess is that they have underlying assumptions or an emotional connection to supernatural explanations.
I can tell you why.
Yeah.
They don't give us eternal life. They're an explanation that we can get to. It can easily explain, why my cup went missing or why I forgot something at home. Like, we could plug it in with that instead of supernatural in the sense of ghosts and apparitions. But that explanation there doesn't give me what I actually want, which is to be able to live forever. So I'm going to favor the ones that also seem to carry something about an afterlife. That would be my answer to that. I think that's why they're never considered.
Kate, 1 minute or less. Did you want to say anything? Say anything else?
Just because I believe in this kind of thing, it doesn't really necessarily mean that there is a life after this one. It doesn't mean that we're consciously aware of our friends and family that we meet on the other side. I don't believe in another side. I believe it's possible that there are several. So that's why, from my point of view, it doesn't matter to me whether or not the supernatural exists or doesn't exist. Should I go somewhere after this place, I'm not going to be aware of it. Okay. So I think that's kind of where the difference comes in for those who want activity to be supernatural and those who don't.
Well, Kate, thank you.
If that makes any sense.
Thank you so much for taking the time to call in today. It was a good conversation.
Yeah, thank you kindly.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, and I enjoyed very much talking to you guys.
Awesome. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
I'm telling you, Steve, I really do want ghosts to be real. Like, that is a really cool concept, and I would love their. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry if that's disappointing to hear.
No, you're not alone. Like, I get it. It's just, I mean, you got to watch out. If you want something to be true, you are going to find the evidence for it. Like, that tends to be the way that most people go.
I won't cave. I'm not budging. I can't say I'm not budging. I'll budge if evidence becomes available. But it's going to take something really compelling for me to go, this is actually true.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get why people want it. Especially, here's one, intelligent aliens. I can totally see why people want that to be true. That would be very cool.
That'd be awesome.
And interestingly, you take the grand cosmos and everything, statistically, there's almost certainly very smart aliens that exist out there. Problem is that what's the chances of interaction? Very, very, very slim.
Well, yeah, I hope we get interactions with intelligent alien life someday.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson did say something good on that, and that is that we don't try to really communicate with chimps that are basically.
I was just going to talk about that because he said there's a was it a 1% genetic difference? Between us and chimps, and if so, adult chimps can do what kids can do, and then he went into saying, imagine if aliens had that same 1% difference, and they're doing quantum physics at age 5.
Yeah, and it's like, would they really care to interact with us? No. It'd probably be like the interactions that we have with basically every other species, complete extortion, annihilation, and then happy stickers being slapped on it. So it wouldn't be good. I don't want to meet aliens.
Well, hopefully they're friendly.